Is this thing on? Hey guys, welcome back to another episode of the Summits Podcast. Back at the University of Notre Dame today, more specifically the Harper Cancer Research Institute. Our guest for this episode is Dr. Andy Bullock. He is the Associate Director of the Harper Cancer Research Institute. Dr. Bullock, welcome to the Summits Podcast.
Thank you. It's great to be here.
Why don't you introduce yourself to the audience, give us a little background history on yourself.
Certainly. So I actually grew up in South Bend.
Okay.
Going through grade school and high school here, Notre Dame was this small school. I had a Catholic heritage and a great undergraduate education reputation and a football team, and that's all I knew about it. And it wasn't really until I got here that you see just how involved they are in so many different things, particularly cancer. But I did my undergrad down in Bloomington. I then
Congratulations.
Thank you. Only the best.
That's right.
Bloomington.
I'm just going to excuse myself from the conversation.
And then my PhD in molecular biology at Cornell in New York City. And as I was finishing that up, I took a commission in the Navy as a medical service corps officer and did that for 6 years in San Diego. And while I was in San Diego, I got my MBA in finance, international business.
Underachieving already. Wow.
Quite.
What prompted you to go the Navy route?
Well, so a lot of my family members, and this is common in the military, a lot of people in the military have family in the military. My grandfather's in the military, and a lot of his siblings and in-laws, and my father and stepfather in the military. My brother was just retired. He was active duty Navy for 20 years.
Okay. Yeah, my dad spent 24 years, 21 years, somewhere there. Retired as captain from the Navy.
It's no small feat.
Yeah.
Retiring as captain's tough.
Yeah.
Scotty retired as a lieutenant commander, which he had a great career and I'm proud of him. But retiring as captain's quite the.
He spent a few years in San Diego as well.
20 years in the Navy.
He's now shared some of those stories with me. As a young kid, he wouldn't share those stories. Sound like a good time.
Yes. Yes. So he was a ship captain or a pilot, or what did he do in the Navy?
I should know the answer to this. I would say ship captain, but that's about as much as I could tell you.
Yeah, well, if he was with the fleet, he was going to up in San Diego sooner or later.
Yeah, spent some time in Japan as well, Yokosuka.
Yeah, sure. No, for me personally, it was, we lived in New York City during 9/11, and I wanted to do my part.
Okay.
Wow.
Awesome. How long were you in the Navy?
6 years active.
6 active, okay. And then you got the MBA while doing that as well?
Yes.
Okay, that's impressive. What then ultimately brought you back to South Bend?
Well, I was getting out of the Navy. I had served my time and knew I didn't want to make a career out of it. I was looking at several different opportunities in business and academia, and being on both coasts for a while. My brother was on both, away. My parents and family were still, my grandparents were in South Bend. My parents were in Chicago, so it would, I had kids now, so there's like an interest in coming back, and just came across this job. Harper had just opened. This was 10 years ago. I was I think I was Sharon's first hire, and to build something from scratch and sort of mold it in the ways you want it to go was too good an opportunity to pass up.
Sure. Yeah. What have you witnessed over those 10 years, or the past 10 years, in terms of how Harper has gone from, starting to where it is today? What stands out to you?
Geez. I mean, my first day here, I came in, and all the labs are empty. I mean, Sharon was the only person here for the most part. There are IU School of Medicine faculty, because Harper's a collaboration with the IU School of Medicine in South Bend, but they were mostly in the Racklin Carmichael side of the building. So it was just you could feel the newness, because the building had just open, like 6 or 8 months before. And so there weren't any research programs yet because the institute was brand new. I mean, the things we're doing now in cancer health disparities initiatives and collaborations with the universities. You know, there's collaborations with IU, but we have collaborations with universities across the country, around the world, and I mean, those were just ideas at the time, and to build those has been a wonderful experience.
Yeah. Speaking of collaborations, we've been talking about that a lot the last couple of days. Some people might view them as, you know, thinking from the athletic field when everybody's competing against one another, but cancer doesn't care what your affiliation is. How important are those collaborations, not just for the state of Indiana, but beyond as well?
Oh, they're crucial. It's the only way forward. I don't want to say easy because none of the questions are easy, but I will, having just said I won't use the word easy. The easy questions in the fight against cancer, those have been asked and answered.
Yeah.
The questions and the challenges facing researchers today, you just can't tackle those with one perspective. So you probably have heard the drug Taxol. This is a good way to illustrate that, I think. Taxol is one of the most impactful and useful chemotherapy drugs ever created. Billions in dollars in sales. It's impacted, you know, millions of lives. It's a real success story in the fight against cancer. Taxol came about by, in the 50s, there was, I believe it was the 50s, there was a National Cancer Institute call for more drugs. And so they were looking for things that killed cells, and sooner or later they got around to scraping something off the bark of a Pacific yew tree. And in the 50s they found out that that was very cytotoxic. In the 60s and 70s they figured out what it was in the bark that was actually cytotoxic, this paclitaxel, the compound. In the 80s it went into clinical trials, and again, $1 billion drug in the year 2000.
Yeah.
Nobody knew how it really worked. I mean, the papers on how it worked were still coming out in 2014. It binds microtubules. Wow. So decades after it's been this incredible drug, the mechanism behind it and how it really does what it does, that's not how cancer drugs were made. It was find something that kills cells. Hopefully it kills cancer cells before it kills patients, and run with it. And there's been success that way. And to do that, you need to be phenomenal chemists. I mean, incredible medicinal chemistry is needed to do something like that. And the people who came up with this drug, you can't laud them enough. But that's happened. And drugs now are being designed because you first understand the cancer cell. You try and figure out how the cancer cell is different. And then you come up with interventions specific to those. And in order to do that, you need to be a great medicinal chemist, but you'd also need to be a great tumor biologist, and you'd also be a great molecular biologist. You need to be a great mathematician and data scientist, and one person can't be all of those things. You need a team. That's what was great about Harper, and one of the reasons I came here is it was building that from scratch. And there's a lot of flexibility, and we can be very nimble because we're small. There are, you know, IU Simon has a phenomenal, I mean, it is a phenomenal cancer center, and Purdue's Cancer Center, both of them are NCI designated. They're two of the best cancer centers in the world, and we are not that, we're not that big, and we are not on that level in many ways. But at the same time, the quality of research here, from the grants that come in from the NCI and from other foundations, and the quality of the faculty is as good as you'll find anywhere, and we have a lot of flexibility to tackle things that I just love being a part of.
Yeah, I like that teamwork approach because when you're telling the story about that drug, I mean, I'm sitting here thinking, oh my gosh, it took 60 plus years to get from discovering the tree bark to something that could even be potentially applicable to a patient. I'm neither a PhD nor MD at all. I'm hoping that maybe today technology also plays a role in that, can help perhaps speed that process up to whatever extent that it can?
Oh, I mean, absolutely. I'm trying to think of, Brian Baker is a chemist here, in immunology, and his research, or part of his research, is all about completely understanding how an antibody binds and that antibody-antigen interaction and the specificity that's there, and then manipulating that to enhance that, particularly in fighting cancer. And you definitely need a lot of the technology to understand that, and the computers to model and build those steps forward. And that's the first one that comes to mind. But there are several here. There are several. I mean, that's where cancer research is right now. So.
Right. Is there a particular project either currently going on or that has gone on over the last 10 years that really stands out to you?
Oh, yes, several. Well, you've been spoken with Lori Littlepage, and so I won't rehash her project, but that there's a real need for a treatment for breast cancer metastasis to the bone, and that has the potential to be one, which was, I just keep thinking the impact that would have. There is a tumor cells secrete a message. It's little bits of RNA that get into the circulation, and it's sort of a way. I mean, it's how they communicate with the cells around them, but it's sort of a way, broadly speaking, where tumor cells are jumping up and down saying, "Hey, I'm cancer." And there's research here to try and detect those little signals from the circulation, which, if possible, or when it's possible, will allow people to diagnose cancer very early. Well, one of the reasons the prognosis for breast cancer is so much higher than pancreatic cancer or ovarian cancer is you can detect it in phase 1, and any cancer you can detect in phase 1 has a better prognosis typically. But if you could detect pancreatic cancer in the early stage, or some of those other internal tumors, without even coming up with new drugs necessarily, you could have a huge impact on those survival curves. So that could be really impactful. And just as an aside, this is something that I heard from Dr. Otis Brawley when he was the Chief Medical Officer of the American Cancer Society. He was here for a talk, and he was saying about how universally the late stage cancers have a worse prognosis than early stage cancers, except for one time. There's one situation where you have a better survival being diagnosed with late stage cancer than if you're diagnosed with early stage cancer.
Okay. Which is that?
If you're diagnosed with late stage cancer and you have health insurance, you have a better survivability than if you're diagnosed with early stage cancer and you do not have health insurance. So anyone, not to get political, but anyone who says it doesn't matter if you have health insurance, you can get access to that's fundamentally not true.
Yeah. Interesting. That project though sounds very interesting because you're dead on. I mean, the earlier it can be detected, the better chances you got, for sure.
Yeah. And to answer your question a little more directly, one of the projects I've really enjoyed being a part of is the work we're doing in cancer health disparities. So cancer health disparities are differential outcomes for different people based on any number of factors: race, ethnicity, socioeconomic factors. And they're tragic and they're massive, and they're global. So in the United States today, a newly diagnosed child with ALL has a 90% chance of surviving 10 years. It's one of the great success stories in cancer research. 50 years ago, that was basically a death sentence. And now there's a 90% chance that kid will survive 10 years, which is sort of a proxy for beating cancer. In Mexico, that same kid has a 60% chance of surviving 4 years.
Okay. Wow.
Now, why is that? Obviously, stage of detection factors in. Obviously, quality of care factors in. But there was a paper that came out from UCSF not too long ago, and even when you normalize for socioeconomic factors overall, that eliminates disparities, or that reduces disparities, but does not eliminate disparities. There's something else there. There's a molecular basis for some of these disparities. And unless we can collect tissues from different types of patients, we're never going to be able to tackle those completely. For a number of reasons, most of the tissue that researchers have access to comes from people that look like me. People that look like me are much more likely to get to MD Anderson or Memorial Sloan Kettering, or the types of places, these wonderful world-class organizations. And that's where a lot of the tissue is collected. There's a lot of, and rightfully so, mistrust, well-earned mistrust, you might say, with certain populations about engaging with the healthcare community. But that makes it much more difficult to get that tissue. And if, as medicine's getting more precise, just like we were talking about, it's not scraping something off a tree and see if it kills cancer, it's understanding the cancer. But if you're only understanding my cancer, then the drug you come up with is going to do a great job on me, and hopefully it'll help other people. And what we're trying to do is flip that and collect tissue from different racial and ethnic backgrounds, so we can build models and design drugs that will help them, and hopefully it might help me too.
Right.
And getting engaged with different populations, different healthcare, different donors, because there aren't that many funding mechanisms that let you collect tissue from all these populations. I mean, it's hard to do.
I think that personalization of medicine to another level. I mean, truly getting too personal, but to everyone.
Quite. Yeah. Absolutely.
Cool.
Absolutely. So that's one of the things that I think Harper and Notre Dame are very well suited to do, that it might be more difficult to do somewhere else. So I really enjoy being a part of that.
Yeah, that's awesome. One of the cornerstones of the Summits podcast is talking about each of our different cancer stories. We all have many. Andy, what is one of your cancer stories?
Yeah. So cancer impacts everybody, and if it hasn't impacted you yet, it will. That's the horrible part about cancer. And I have lost relatives to cancer. One of my best friends from the Navy. I knew I was going to need those Kleenex. Maybe I'll talk about something else. It is, I mean, one of the projects we're working on with, I mentioned that disparity in Mexico is trying to design or helping researchers in Mexico design an early diagnostic for leukemia. So when these kids might present, in a rural part of Mexico where the healthcare infrastructure is nothing like we take for granted here, it presents, leukemia, you're tired, you're uncomfortable, there's that general malaise, and then that's a million other things. And so coming up with a blood test for these that can detect the signal we're trying to find wouldn't diagnose those kids with leukemia. It would say, hey, this is more than you're just being tired, and instead of staying in this rural part of Mexico right now, you should go to the cancer center in the capital and be tested earlier, which could really shift that survival curve. And you see these kids when you go down there and work with our collaborators down there. There's an organization called Una Nueva Esperanza that was founded by this gentleman, Don Francisco. Essentially, I'm giving you a very abridged version of things, but 20 or so years ago, he would see these families that were essentially almost living on the street because they were taking a bus for several hours into the heart of Puebla. Puebla's the capital city of the province of Puebla. They didn't have anywhere to stay. Their kids were getting treated for cancer, and so he started Nueva Esperanza to give them a place to stay. It's sort of like a Ronald McDonald House almost. It's grown into so much more than that. They have education programs and I mean, like, not just education programs. They have a little school so the kids can keep up with their studies. There's a chapel, a cafeteria, and there's actually a research arm funded by faculty and graduate students from the local, from UPAYEP. It's the main college there, or one of the main colleges there, and that's actually UPAYEP's where Notre Dame students do their study abroad in Mexico. And so we built that. Now Notre Dame students, when they're studying abroad, are actually doing cancer research in these labs, working on this project, and it's been great to see that grow. And you just see these kids that 30 years ago wouldn't have a chance, and now at least there's a much better chance. So
Yeah.
and that sort of ties it all together with the cancer story I was trying to talk about is a good friend of mine from the Navy. His son was just diagnosed with leukemia. So it hits home.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Any questions you have for us?
Well, yes, there are several, probably more than you want, but and the first one is, do you think you realize the impact that you guys make?
I think on some level we probably do. Do we grasp the full, the full impact? Maybe not. I don't know. I guess the reason why I say that is because I'm always looking at the next thing.
Yeah.
It's kind of the way my mind works, for better and worse. I mean, we hope we are, clearly, and that's kind of why we're doing this. And I know that when we first started doing some funding of research, let's say we only had $10,000, and we were like, in the world of research, like, that's nothing. And we would go to folks like yourself and say, okay, we have $10,000. I know that's not much, but we were pretty quickly stopped. Said, no, look, that's very important.
Yeah.
No, it's not a $10 million grant, but these docs that have various ideas, they can't just go get the $10 million grant from the get-go. They've got to prove stuff out first. And as we were talking about with Dr. Stack, I mean, a mouse, one mouse could be $500. So that 10 grand is very important.
Yeah.
And so I think that's what was kind of rewarding, knowing that, we may not be bringing millions to the table, but every little bit helps. And, go back to that collaboration factor. You have all these different foundations or individuals coming together, and regardless of what they're putting in the pot, it all makes a difference. And that's rewarding to us to know that whatever contribution we can make is going to make a difference and help out.
Absolutely.
I just think it's been interesting talking here today about how, like, the right impact in the right spot, no matter how big or small it is, can just change, either research that's being done or lead to something that leads to the next funding round. Or,
right.
We've been talking with different researchers over the past couple of days, and it's amazing to see how, some of these little bits of research have now turned into, like you mentioned, $1 billion worth of drugs, and then millions of people impacted by it. So, like you said, whether it's small or big, the impact, the right impact in the right place can make a huge ongoing impact for patients and the future of cancer research.
Mm-hmm. No, both of those things are absolutely true. The one thing I would add to it is the projects that you fund, it's not as though that would happen anyway. It's something that otherwise wouldn't exist.
Okay.
We have philanthropic support for pilot programs that we'll launch, and we'll get 15 different applicants in any given year, and when you're reviewing them, maybe 2 or 3 right off the bat, you're like, well, these just aren't ready, or there's not a lot here they should think about a little bit more, something like that. That still leaves you with 10 or 12, and maybe you can fund 1 or 2. Mm-hmm. And all those other ideas it's not like, well, they happen anyway. They just don't happen a lot of the times.
Yeah.
And if there's not support from, foundations, funds from people like you, I mean, you're basically picking up on those ideas that wouldn't happen otherwise, and you're making it happen. You're moving the ball forward. Use any sports analogy you want, but they're apt because each one of those things makes a difference. And I tell people, so with the ACS as Coaches versus Cancer and with Swing for Heroes, when people are out there playing golf, I'm like, oh, they're just playing golf, they're having a good time. But no, they're really doing more than that, because that money that they're raising by playing golf matters. Mm-hmm. It matters a tremendous amount. That's fighting cancer. I was fortunate enough to go to the gala event. Wonderful time. And you don't think, well, you're fighting cancer doing that, but that money is how you're able to do what you do. And I see the impact it has. I see the research that wouldn't happen otherwise. And so I can't thank you enough.
Yeah, well, you're welcome. It's our pleasure. And we take great pride and joy in doing it. Adds a little more stress to the plate, but hey, that's what it's okay. Not a problem. We appreciate what you guys are doing. We appreciate you taking the time out of your day to join us. And we appreciate you guys for joining us on this episode of the Summits Podcast. Wherever you're listening in or wherever you're watching, preferably on the Heroes Foundation YouTube channel, don't forget to hit that like button, subscribe, and notification bell. And until next time, beat cancer.